The window is already open. High above the stone courtyard of Jezreel, a woman stands at the edge, painted, jeweled, and completely still. Her eyes are lined in black coal, sharp and perfect. Rubies catch the morning light at her throat. Her robes, deep purple silk, move in the hot desert wind like the last breath of a dying kingdom. Below her, soldiers wait on horseback. Swords hang at their sides. Hooves shift against dry earth. Dust lifts and falls. Nobody speaks. She does not step back. She does not call for help. She simply looks down at the man on the horse, the man who has come to end everything, and she holds her chin level, because even now, even at the very last moment of her life, Jezebel refuses to let anyone see her break. Her name alone once cleared rooms. Kings adjusted their plans because of her. Prophets ran because of her. An entire nation changed its spiritual direction because of her. She turned one weak man into her instrument and used the throne of Israel like a personal weapon for decades. And now, right now, she is standing at a palace window in full royal dress, staring down at the man who has just arrived to destroy everything she built. If you have ever wondered what it looks like when unchecked power finally meets its end, this is the moment. And if you want to understand how a woman born a foreign princess became the most feared ruler in the ancient world, you are in the right place. Welcome, because this story is going to take you somewhere most history lessons never go. The man on the horse looks up. His name is Jehu. His eyes are hard. His army is behind him, stretching back through the city gates, dust rising from 1,000 moving feet. He does not negotiate. He does not hesitate. He looks up at that window and says 3 words: calm, cold, and final. Throw her down. And the servants standing beside Jezebel, the people she fed, the people she commanded, the people who owed her everything, they look at each other. Then they look at her. How does the most powerful woman in Israel end up here? How does someone who once controlled kings, silenced prophets, and bent an entire nation to her will end up standing at a window with nowhere left to go? This is the storyteller's gospel. To answer that, we have to go back, all the way back, to the moment a princess from a foreign land first decided that power was the only thing worth living for. She arrived in Israel like a storm that had not yet shown its full strength. The royal procession moved through the gates of Samaria on a blazing afternoon. Trumpets, silk canopies, the sharp smell of Phoenician cedar oil, and at the center of it all, a young woman whose dark eyes scanned the capital city of her new kingdom with the focused attention of someone taking inventory. Not admiring, assessing. Jezebel had grown up in Sidon, a powerful Phoenician port city where the air always tasted of salt and cedar and the sea. Her father, Ethbaal, ruled it with total authority. He was not simply a king. He was also a high priest of Baal, the god of storms, rain, and harvests. And inside his palace, religion and political power were never separated. They were the same tool. Jezebel had watched her father use that tool her entire life. By the time she was a young woman, she had already absorbed the most dangerous lesson power can teach anyone. Fear is faster than love, and control is more reliable than loyalty. The marriage to Ahab, king of Israel, was political, a strategic alliance between 2 kingdoms. Ahab's advisors had probably told him he was getting a queen. What he actually got was a co-pilot who had no intention of sitting in the second seat. Ahab was not a weak man by the standards of his time. He built cities. He won battles. His kingdom was prosperous. But he had a particular blindness, the kind that sometimes comes with power, where a man sees strength in another person and mistakes it for alignment with his own goals. He looked at Jezebel and saw someone who would make him stronger. He was not entirely wrong about her strength. He was completely wrong about whose goals it would serve. Within months of her arrival, the spiritual landscape of Israel began to shift. She had not come alone. She brought her priests of Baal with her. hundreds of them, along with everything required to establish a new religious center inside a kingdom that already had one. It did not happen all at once. It was gradual. First a private altar, then a small temple, then construction on something larger. And Ahab, who watched all of this unfold, said nothing that stopped it. The people of Israel whispered. The priests of God exchanged worried looks in the market corridors of the capital. Something was changing in the air of the kingdom, and everyone could feel it the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds actually arrive. The disappearances started quietly. One morning, a prophet who had spoken publicly against Baal worship was simply gone. His home was empty. His neighbors said soldiers had come before sunrise. Then another man vanished. Then 3 more in a single week. No trials, no public accusations, no bodies left where families could find them. Just silence. Jezebel did not make dramatic announcements about what she was doing. She moved quietly, surgically, like someone who understood that the most effective way to destroy a belief system is not to attack it loudly, it is to remove the people who carry it, one by one, until the voice of that belief goes completely mute. She had 850 priests of Baal installed across the land, eating at the royal table, walking freely through cities where, just seasons before, they would have been unwelcome. Ahab watched. He did not stop her. Not once. Fear moved through Israel like a cold draft through stone corridors. Faithful men stopped speaking openly. Families worshiped behind closed doors. Some prophets fled into the wilderness. A man named Obadiah, who managed the royal household and secretly still feared God, hid 100 prophets in caves, 50 to a cave, bringing them bread and water at personal risk to his own life. Because to be known as a man of God in Israel during Jezebel's reign was to make yourself a target. He walked through the palace entrance like he owned it. No royal summons, no escort, no advance notice sent ahead to prepare the king. Elijah of Tishbe arrived in the court of Ahab the way lightning arrives, with no warning and no apology. His clothes were rough. His sandals were worn from desert roads. He looked completely out of place, but he did not act like it. He stood before King Ahab, and the room went quiet in that particular way rooms go quiet when everyone present suddenly understands that something important and irreversible is about to happen. Elijah looked at the king and spoke. He said that the God of Israel, the one whose prophets were disappearing, whose altars were being replaced, whose name was being systematically removed from public life, was very much still present. And as proof of that presence, the sky would now close. No rain, no dew, not a single drop of relief for the land, the crops, or the livestock. Not until Elijah himself said otherwise. Then he left. Weeks passed, the sky stayed sealed. The ground cracked, rivers thinned to brown trickles. Crops stopped growing. Livestock began dying in the fields. The bread in the market grew expensive and then difficult to find at all. The heat became a physical weight pressing down on every city, every village, every family trying to feed children from a land that had stopped producing. The drought was real. And somewhere in the palace, sitting at her table, receiving reports from across the kingdom, watching Ahab's face grow more anxious with each season that passed without rain, Jezebel understood that Elijah had not been making a threat, he had made a promise. She was going to find every last prophet she could reach, and she was going to make sure none of them ever spoke again. The hunt was methodical. Jezebel did not send one soldier, she sent many. Her soldiers searched the caves, the hills, the wilderness valleys where desperate men tried to disappear. The operation was organized the way a military campaign is organized, because that is exactly what it was. A campaign to silence the voice of God in Israel by eliminating every human throat that carried it. Many were caught, many were executed. The fear across Israel became a living thing. It moved through families, through villages, through the careful eyes of people who chose their words in public the way you choose your steps on unstable ground. slowly, watching where each one lands. And still Elijah was alive. That fact alone was enough to keep Jezebel from feeling that the job was finished. Then the drought entered its third year, and God told Elijah it was time to go back. Not to hide again, not to survive quietly in another location, but to walk directly back into Israel and present himself before the same king and the same queen who had been hunting him since he first darkened the palace door. When Ahab finally saw Elijah again, his first words were an accusation, calling him the man who had brought disaster on Israel. Elijah did not flinch. He told Ahab the truth, that it was not a prophet who had brought disaster on Israel. It was a king who followed his wife straight into idol worship. And then Elijah issued a challenge so bold, so direct, and so deliberately public that it gave Jezebel's entire religious establishment no room to decline without the whole nation watching them do it. A contest, Mount Carmel. Every prophet of Baal Jezebel had installed across the kingdom, all 450 of them, against one man who served a god they had spent 3 years trying to erase. 450 men stood on Mount Carmel, and not one of them looked afraid. They had every reason to feel confident. They had the queen behind them. They had the palace behind them. They had 3 years of unchallenged religious dominance across Israel behind them. And standing across from all that organized power, all those numbers, all that institutional weight, was one man in rough clothing who had spent the last 3 years hiding in the wilderness, eating food brought to him by birds. The crowd that gathered on that mountain had come to watch a contest. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, 2 sides calling on their God to send fire from the sky to consume the offering. Whichever God answered, that was the real God of Israel. Simple, clear, no room for excuses afterward. The prophets of Baal went first. They prayed in the morning, loud, organized, rhythmic chanting that rolled across the mountain with the kind of practiced energy that came from years of professional religious performance. When nothing happened, they prayed louder. By midday, they were shouting, cutting their own skin with swords, working themselves into a physical desperation that the watching crowd could not look away from. Hours passed. The sun moved across a cloudless sky. The altar sat cold and untouched. Not a spark, not a whisper, nothing. Then Elijah stepped forward. He rebuilt an old altar that had fallen apart, 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel, a quiet statement made in silence without a single word of explanation. He arranged the wood. He placed the sacrifice. Then he told the people standing nearby to pour water over everything. 4 large jars, then 4 more, then 4 more again. Water ran off the altar and filled the trench dug around it until the ground was soaked, and every person watching understood that he was removing any possible question about what was about to happen. He looked up at the sky. He prayed one single prayer, quiet, direct, no theatrics, and the fire came down. It did not flicker in slowly. It did not build from a small spark. The fire fell from the sky and consumed everything: the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and every drop of water sitting in that trench, in one violent, total, undeniable moment. The crowd dropped to the ground. Some people pressed their faces into the dirt. Others grabbed the people next to them. Nobody ran because there was nowhere to run from something that enormous. From the edge of the mountain to the back of the crowd, every single person present understood in their bones what they had just witnessed. The 450 prophets of Baal had prayed for hours. Elijah had prayed for 30 seconds. The people cried out that the Lord was the true God of Israel, not quietly, not politely, but with the full volume desperation of a nation that had been spiritually lost for years and had just been violently snapped back to reality by a fire that left no room for doubt. The prophets of Baal were seized, every one of them, and then the sky, which had been locked for 3 full years, cracked open. Clouds built from nothing over the Mediterranean. The wind shifted, and before Ahab's chariot could reach the city of Jezreel, the rain came down, heavy, real, soaking the cracked ground that had been waiting 3 years for exactly this moment. The drought was over. Everything Jezebel had built her religious takeover on had just been publicly and completely destroyed on a mountain in front of the entire nation. The news reached Jezebel before nightfall. She did not sit down and reconsider. She did not ask any questions that might lead her toward humility. She picked up a pen and sent a message directly to Elijah, personally, deliberately, with her name on it, promising that within 24 hours, he would be dead. Not defeated, not exiled, dead. That message tells the whole story of who Jezebel was beneath the crown. Mount Carmel had not shaken her faith in Baal. It had wounded her pride. And wounded pride in a person with unlimited power is one of the most dangerous forces in any room, in any era, in any kingdom. The vineyard sat right next to the palace. That was the problem. Ahab could see it from his window. A small, well-kept plot of land owned by a man named Naboth, who had inherited it from his father, who had inherited it from his father before that. Family land, old land, the kind of land that carries not just soil but memory and identity and the specific weight of generations. Ahab wanted it for a vegetable garden. He made Naboth a reasonable offer, fair market value, or an even better piece of land somewhere else in the kingdom. He was not trying to steal it. Naboth said no, not because he was being difficult, but because in Israel, family land carried legal and spiritual significance that made selling it an act of severing yourself from your own inheritance. Ahab went home, lay down on his bed, turned his face to the wall, and refused to eat. A grown king, a military commander who had won battles, lying on his bed, refusing dinner because a farmer said no to a real estate offer. Jezebel found him there. She looked at her husband, sulking, silent, staring at the wall, and her response was not sympathy. It was contempt dressed up as efficiency. She told him to get up, to eat, to stop worrying, because she would get him the vineyard. What she did next was not impulsive. It was organized, deliberate, and ice cold. She drafted letters in Ahab's name. She arranged a formal public assembly. She hired 2 men willing to stand up in that assembly and testify, falsely, that Naboth had cursed God and cursed the king. Under the law, that accusation carried the death penalty. Naboth was publicly accused of crimes he never committed. He was taken outside the city. He was stoned to death. And the vineyard was delivered to Ahab like a gift wrapped in another man's blood. Ahab walked down to claim it without a single recorded word of objection. But something had been watching every letter Jezebel wrote, every bribe she arranged, every stone that struck Naboth. And that witness was already sending Elijah back. Ahab was standing in Naboth's vineyard when Elijah arrived. He had barely had time to look around the property he had wanted so badly before a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the land. The same rough clothing, the same unhurried walk, the same eyes that carried no fear of the man who wore the crown of Israel. Ahab saw him, and his first word was an accusation. He called Elijah his enemy. Elijah did not correct him. He looked at the king standing in a dead man's field and delivered a judgment so specific, so direct, and so final that it left no room for negotiation or appeal. Because Ahab had sold himself to do evil, because he had taken a man's life and stolen his land, disaster was coming to his house. Every male descendant of his line, gone. The dynasty he had built, the legacy he had planned, the continuation of his name through generations, all of it canceled. And then it named Jezebel specifically, not as a side note, not as an afterthought, by name, with precision. The woman who had orchestrated Naboth's murder, who had installed false religion across Israel, who had hunted prophets and silenced truth for decades, She would not die in a palace. She would not be buried with the honor of a queen. The prophecy was already in motion, quiet and patient and absolute, moving through time toward a specific morning, a specific city, and a specific window. And she would be standing right at it. The horses arrived at Jezreel before the warning did. Jehu had been a military commander in Israel, one of the generals who had served the crown for years. But a prophet had found him privately, poured oil over his head, and declared him the next king of Israel, with one specific assignment attached to the appointment. The house of Ahab was to end, every part of it. Jehu moved fast. He did not send messengers ahead. He did not give the palace time to prepare a defense or evacuate. He drove his chariot at full speed, and the watchman on the tower at Jezreel saw him coming from a distance and recognized the driving style. Reckless, urgent, the way a man drives when he is not coming to visit, but coming to finish something. Word reached the palace. Jezebel heard it. She heard who was coming, what he had done to the previous king, what his appointment meant for everyone inside that building. She had lived through enough political crises to understand exactly what this moment was, and she made a choice that no one who heard about it afterward ever fully forgot. She did not run. She did not hide. She did not send out a peace offering or attempt a negotiation. She went to her room, painted her eyes with fresh coal, arranged her hair, dressed in her royal clothing, and walked to the upper window of the palace. Think about what that means for a moment. This woman, in the final minutes of her reign, chose to face her end dressed like a queen. Whatever she was, and history has never been gentle in its description of her, she was not going to be dragged out of a hiding place looking like a fugitive. She would stand at that window the way she had always stood in every room she entered, like she owned it. Jehu rode through the gate. She looked down at him and spoke, a reference to a king who had died violently before him, a challenge wrapped in composure, a final display of the defiance that had defined her entire life. Jehu looked up. He did not address her. He looked past her at the servants standing in the window around her and asked one question: "Who is on my side?" Two servants stepped forward. Jehu told them to throw her down, and they did. The woman who had moved kings, silenced prophets, rewritten the spiritual laws of a nation, and ruled with a confidence that never publicly cracked, fell. The horses moved through the courtyard, and when someone came later to bury her, almost nothing was found. Just as the prophecy had said, just as Elijah had spoken in Naboth's vineyard on the day Ahab asked why his enemy had found him again. The most feared queen in the Bible was gone, but her story was never meant to simply end there. It was meant to be a warning, permanent, clear, and loud enough to carry across centuries. Power without integrity does not last. Control built on fear eventually runs out of people willing to be afraid. And the truth, no matter how many prophets you silence, has a way of finding its voice again. Jezebel's name outlived her kingdom, outlived the dynasty she protected, outlived every altar she built and every prophet she hunted. Not as a legacy to admire, as a lesson to remember. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see something differently, drop your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Jezebel's story stayed with you the most? Was it her rise, her ruthlessness, or that final moment at the window? Share your answer and let your words inspire someone else who needed to hear this story today. And if you are not subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because the next story coming to this channel carries the same weight, the same truth, and the same power to change the way you see history forever. Do not miss it.